Michael Robertson here with you. Very glad that you are tuning in, and I hope that you are at home and you're in a comfortable position, your position where you're not going to be disturbed, and that you have pen and paper there with you so that you'll be able to take some notes. Hopefully this information will be something that we can all use in trying to possibly help to influence those that are around us that are in man-made churches that are involved in sectarianism, so as to be able to help them to realize the error in which they are in so that they might be able to come out of that. That is, in fact, the design of this television program and the times of assemblies that we have at 823 Starland Avenue, 120 American Legion Boulevard in Danville, Virginia, and 250 Boulevard in Eden, North Carolina. Because, friends, we have been given a great blessing, but at the same time of it being a great blessing, it is also something that is very dangerous. And that is the blessing of knowing. We in the churches of Christ, and even some of those that are viewing, some of you that are watching that are not members of the Church of Christ, you know as to what the Bible actually has to say about the one true church that Jesus built, the doctrine, the teachings that are found in said church, that's found in the Scriptures, and what you also know about true salvation. What the Bible, how God has actually ordered and commanded men and women to be saved today. Now, that's a blessing, because if you are obedient to that knowing, you realize that knowing and you're obedient to it, well, then you're going to be saved. But the dangerous position that ends up coming with knowing is that, well, once you know, you now have to share that information. And that's where it gets dangerous, and that's where it gets tricky. This evening, we're going to be studying some information to just show, hopefully, just how tricky it might be. Before doing that, I want to extend the invitation for the Revelation class that we have going on, because I know once I get into this material, I'll be trying to rush to get this in at the end, so I want to go ahead and get it out at the front. The book of Revelation studies are still going on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. I actually don't know if we're going to be having Revelation class this Wednesday, because we're supposed to be having a sing night at Martinsville this coming Wednesday night. So I guess if Caleb wants to text me, since he's the teacher, as to what he wants to do about that, we can let you know. But we hope that you'll come out and study the book of Revelation with us, because, friends, I mean, this truly is a vital book. I mean, actually, last week we got into some very heavy discussion just as to, how extreme might we have to become as Christians. When you're studying the book of Revelation, you're realizing there's great turmoil. There is tribulation, that really famous word that a lot of Christians like to throw around, that tribulation period. This is a desperate time. And desperate times calls for desperate measures. And so we got in a discussion about that as to what does God actually expect of us as being Christians. So come out and visit with us at 823 Starland Avenue Sunday nights with Revelation class. Thursday nights, What Does the Bible Say? Word from the Lord. 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Wednesday night, 9 p.m. for another episode, What Does the Bible Say? Hope you can tune in for those. Now this evening, we're going to be dealing with some information, and we're going to start in an introduction. I do not want you to get lost in the introduction. The introduction this evening is mainly just to get your emotions up. Now, most of the time, you might be thinking to yourself, why would you want our emotions up? Most of the time, y'all are condemning these other churches because all they do is hype people's emotions. Well, brethren, when we're thinking about, as we mentioned before, about knowing and needing to take the message out, when you know something and you know it to be true and everybody else is believing a lie, you're going to need some type of energy that's pushed behind you. You're going to need some zeal put within you so as to go out and actually carry forth that message. So I want to start that way so as to get us energized to realize, look, this is, what we're involved in and what we're striving to do and help people in relieving them from sin. This is serious business, and this is real. I mean, this is real life stuff. I believe the major problem that we're having in the realm of evangelism within the Lord's church, within the churches of Christ, is people really do not believe that sin is as serious as it is. I believe that a great deal of our brethren have stopped believing that there actually is a hell, that there actually is a devil, and that he's out here striving, that he's out here desiring to take people captive and to destroy their lives. And that's what's going to be illustrated by our introduction, I hope. And in our introduction, I want us to learn something from the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul, in his time, he even pulled from information from non-inspired writers that actually had some type of truth to present. In Acts chapter 17, verse 28, he makes reference to one of their poets, one of your own poets has said. Again, in Titus chapter 1 and verse 12, he ends up making the same statement. He calls him a prophet here. One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said. So here's Paul, and he's pulling from information outside of inspired writ, but that still, I mean, this information, though not inspired, still holds truth. And friends, as we begin our introduction, I want to introduce you to some characters. The individual on the screen, this is Michael Lewis Webster. Now, some of the older generation might remember him as Iron Mike Webster. He was the center for the Pittsburgh Steelers from 1974 to 1986. He was a 4-time Super Bowl winner. He was voted All-Pro 7 times, 9 Pro Bowl appearances. And during the time in which he played, and even still today, I believe he's still referred this way as the best center in NFL history. When it came to the person who played center, the man in the middle, who would hike the ball, he's one of the best. He's at the upper tier. And for whatever reason, I forgot to put this in there, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the National Football League Hall of Fame. If you don't know him for those achievements, it may be the case that you remember him for this reason. A newspaper article, title says, "Game Over." Iron Mike Webster committed suicide at the age of 50. He had no money. In fact, he ended up selling all 4 of his Super Bowl rings. No money, divorced. The end of his life was spent living out of his pickup truck. And a couple of months before he died, he actually moved in with his teenage son. This man was so broken, was so confused mentally, that he actually inflicted upon himself self-mutilation. He pulled out his own teeth and then super glued them back in. That's how messed up this person was. Now, he's not the only person that we want you to know about tonight. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why in the world are we even discussing this? You may be thinking to yourself, okay, here's another lesson about the brevity of life, about materialism and covetousness, and how the things of this world aren't at all, what we need to be striving for. I mean, here's a person who was on top of the world, who had it all, fame, fortune, but then, he wasn't happy. I mean, all of that's there, but there's something else here. There's actually something bigger here. There's something actually more deceptive and more devious working behind the scenes with what happened to Michael Lewis Webster. But what happened to Michael Lewis Webster is not an anomaly. It's not, it's not something rare. This is Jason Skrzek. He was a Pittsburgh Steelers well at the same time as Iron Mike Webster. He drove his truck the wrong direction on the interstate and died in a fiery crash at the age of 36. Not only do you have Jason Skrzek and Mike Webster, but you have Terry Long, another Pittsburgh Steeler. All of these individuals, teammates, playing in the same era. Terry Long drank a gallon of antifreeze and died at the age of 45. Now, you may be sitting there at home and you may be thinking to yourself, what in the world could possibly cause these people to do this? Well, one man by the name of Dr. Bennett Omalu. He's a surgeon from Nigeria. He actually did the autopsy on Mike Webster. And when he did the autopsy on Mike Webster and he got to the brain, he thought that he was going to find, this brain that's just completely beat up, that's been completely abused. I mean, after all, he is a football player. But once they opened up his cranium and looked at his brain, they realized that something was off. So Dr. Omalu dug a little bit deeper, and along with Dr. Cyril Wecht and Dr. Julian Bales, they realized that these men, along with 84 other football players, died from a disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. But here's really the twist. Though Dr. Omalu and Dr. Wecht and Dr. Julian Bales would say CTE is the disease that actually killed these men, CTE was not what killed these men. They might have had CTE, but there was something else going on that actually ended up killing these football players. And just to give us some information, you might be asking yourself even further, what is CTE? Well, we'll have some explanation here.
Yes. The Steelers. And the O's? The others. Yes, the other team. Do you even watch football? No, not at all. But I've been studying Mike Webster's position. The man in the middle is quite deceptively the most violent position on the field. He slaps, he punches, the forearm. It's an unremitting storm of subconcussive blows. The head as a weapon on every single play, every single game, every single practice. The time he's a little boy. To a college man culminating in an 18-year professional career. By my calculations, Mike Webster sustained more than 70,000 blows to his head. Now these men, these are the fastest. Now, their speed multiplied by the speed of the men who hit them, the G-forces generated, equivalent to hitting them on the helmet with a sledgehammer. All of this triggered a cascading series of neurological events which unleashed killer proteins on Mike Webster's brain. The tangles invading and strangling his mind from the inside out, like pouring wet concrete down kitchen pipes. As it hardens, it chokes him, leaving him unrecognizable, even to himself. Football, but never played. But I am telling you that playing football killed Mike Webster.
So that's CTE. The continuous hitting of the head of the cranium in football. See, what the problem is that our brain is not inside of our head. It's not attached to anything. It's just there floating around in some liquid. So it's floating around, and when you make sudden contact, your brain shuffles and it actually ends up crashing into the front of your skull or the back or what have you. And doing that over and over and over again ends up releasing, as he said, these proteins, and it ends up choking the brain and ends up destroying the person. Now, again, that's CTE, and that's what these doctors are saying killed these people. But in fact, what you actually have killing these football players was that the truth was concealed. This information came out in 2002. But the NFL actually knew already what the results were, what the concussive, the rate in which these football players were going to have concussions. They knew about this information way before 2002. The NFL was involved in a massive cover-up and falsification of testing and discovery. Their testing was falsified in that they never actually tested any of the helmets. None of their findings were actually based upon actual humans wearing the helmets and crashing into each other. They put the helmets on monkeys and they shaked them around really hard. I believe they actually put them on dogs and on pigs and dropped them on their heads. They put the helmets on crash test dummies, never put it on an actual person. And when they got done with all the testing, they concluded that none of the test subjects received any concussions. Therefore, football has no relation to the human brain and concussions. You can't say that because it never was tested on humans. Now, friends, just stop and consider that. There's the truth of it. These men, these famous men, died in the lowest possible state. Just consider that. Living in the back cab of your pickup truck. And these people knew what was going on all along. What could have ended up saving Mike Webster and Jason Sterlick and Terry Long and so many others? The most recent one to pass from this was Junior Seau of the San Diego Chargers. Was for the NFL to go ahead and come out and to come clean and present the truth. And more than likely, these men would not have died in the manner in which they did. But you see, what we're wanting to do this evening is we're wanting to make connection between the NFL cover-up and what man-made religion is trying to cover up. If you recall in Dr. Amalu and discussing those proteins, it says that it ends up choking the brain. Now, friends, Jesus had the same thing to say about sin. You see, they're dealing with CTE. We're dealing with SIN. Jesus said, Matthew chapter 13, verse 7, and some fell among thorns, talking about the seed, falling among thorns, talking about the different types of hearts, the different type of soils here. Notice this, and thorns sprung up and choked them. In Mark's account, I believe it is, he describes this as being, they're being choked by the cares of this world. Worldliness, fleshliness, being materialistic. What does that do? What does that sinful behavior do? It chokes. But what is the man-made religion saying? What is man-made religion saying? Are they telling you the truth about materialism? They're not telling you any truth about materialism. They're caught up in materialism. Here's Creflo Dollar on his website begging people to help buy him a plane, which he was able to do it. And on his website, they make the request of 200,000 people would commit to sowing $300 or more can help achieve our goal to purchase the G650 airplane. That comes out to over $6 million for an airplane. Now, let me tell you something, friends. If Ted Cruz, which I'm not for Ted Cruz, but I mean, I'll at least give him this. If Ted Cruz can fly coach, or whatever the step above coach is, if he can fly that like the rest of us, so can Creflo Dollar. But what's he presenting? Is he telling you the truth about materialism? That it will in fact end up choking you and destroying you? Now, just think about who it is that's actually sending in this money to Creflo Dollar. It's poor people. You want to know who the most stingy people are in this world? Rich people. People that have money hate to spend money. I used to work at a nursery, and it was so difficult for us to get the tools that we needed. I mean, luckily the guy that I worked with, he was pretty handy with the tools that we did have, and he could fix whatever happened to break. But if something broke to the point where it wasn't able to be fixed, it was like pulling teeth to get our boss to buy us the tools that we need to work at his nursery. And here's the thing, we all knew he had the money to fix it. Leasing BMWs and whatever else, going on cruises to exotic destinations, living in a big old house. But he didn't want to part with that money. Now notice this, Creflo Dollar spending all his money on himself, riding off the poor people. And notice this also. I mean, you can do a search of mega churches throughout the community. I mean, we got the Galilean house of worship, which there's no type of worship going on there. But just look at this monstrosity. Sitting right there on Philpott Highway. There's no need for that. And just think of all the people. Now, all these churches, they're supposedly about helping the community. Let's help the community. Let's see what we can do for the community. The community needs our assistance. You could downsize on the money that you ended up wasting. I'm trying to make sure I don't end up cutting off my hand this whole entire show. The money that was spent on this extravagant building, just think of how many mouths that could have fed. How many hungry children they could have helped. Now, everybody's on to us about how we don't have the love for humanity and how we're just tearing everybody down and we're not lifting anybody up. Why aren't you complaining about Michael Penn and the money he's throwing away? And all these other mega churches throughout our area. You see, they're not concerned about telling you the truth and being able to relieve you from the burden that religion is actually putting on you. Now, friends, you see, that's what sin is. Sin is a choking. In John chapter 8, verse 33 and 34, notice how Jesus describes it here. They answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? Jesus answered them, verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. It's a choking. Not only is it a choking, but you are in bondage. Now, that's what was happening to Mike Webster and Jason Strelzik and Terry Long and those other football players. Their brain was choking them, putting them into bondage where they were being tormented all day. And I've got brethren that know the truth. And they've got family members and they've got friends that are out there living in sin, that are religious now. They're religious and they're living in sin. When who is Jesus talking to here? Let's go ahead and look at John chapter 8 together, and let's get the full context here as to who Jesus is talking to. Notice John chapter 8, get this slimmed up here. There we go, that'll work. Starting in notice here in verse 31. Then Jesus said to those Jews which believed on him, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. He is talking to religious people, and not only are these people religious, they're to a degree, well, they're in the future, they're going to be in the wrong system, but during this time, they're actually in the right system because the Old Testament system is still in effect. But here are Jews, and notice it says that they believed on him. And he says, if you continue my word, then are you my disciples indeed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, here are Jews, religious people, that believe on him, but notice that they're not free yet. These people that he's talking to in verse 33 that are asking about being in bondage, they're the same people back up here that said they believed, and they're religious. Now, friends, here we're getting into that dangerous section. Are you involved in trying to cover up truth? Now, just think about, the NFL, for example. I hope that made you upset. It made me mad. This is actually information coming from a film called Concussion. When I watched that movie, it made me so mad, made me so irritated. Because the whole entire time, the National Football League knew that this was happening to its players, but they didn't tell them. And they just kept putting them out there in the field. Oh, you go out there and play. You bring in that money, and we'll take care of you. And 87 players have died because of going out there and playing that way. Now, is that bad? I mean, is that not just low down? And then once the information started coming out about what was going on, they still didn't want to help them. Man, that's just, that is no good. What is all that about? Again, it's about covering up the truth. I've got brethren that are trying to cover up the truth. Now, if you were feeling that way about the NFL and how they did those players, then that's how you need to feel about yourself. That same way you felt about the NFL when you realized that they were hiding the truth and abusing and misusing those players. And then you've got friends and family members that are in man-made churches that are still out in sin, and they're being choked and they're in bondage and they are the servants to sin. And here you know the truth and you're not telling it. Now, friends, we've got my brethren. I'm talking to my brethren now. We've got to stop that. We've got to change that. We have the ability to know Ephesians chapter 3 and 4. He encouraged the brethren there in Ephesus that if they would read, then they would understand the knowledge of the mystery that Paul had. If we will read, we will know. But if we're going to know, then friends, we have got to go out and we've got to help these people. But the problem with my brethren is, as I mentioned before, they don't see their family members like this. They do not see their friends like this. Because to a great degree, sin is not really something that is as visible, like, for example, with CTE. Man, those football players that have CTE, with the way they behave and the way they act, they're like a bunch of lunatics. They're crazy. You can see it with them. But oftentimes with people are so good at covering up their sin and covering up the pain and the suffering that comes along with sin, that they're going on about their lives as if, everything's fine. But friends, we need to realize they're not fine. They are miserable inside. And part of the reason why they're miserable inside is because while they're being religious and their religion is supposed to be liberating, it's supposed to be setting them free, how are they really? They're being choked. They are under bondage. They are the servants of sin. Let's go back to our PowerPoint here. Romans chapter 6, verse 12. Paul would write to the Roman brethren, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it in the lust thereof. You see, sin is not anything to play with. Sin needs to be exposed. This is the problem that we're having in the world. It's a sin problem. And we've got less and less preachers, gospel preachers, and sectarian preachers, preachers out there in man-made churches. We've got less and less preachers out preaching about sin. And guess what? Sin is reigning. Sin not only reigns, but notice this. Verse 14, for sin shall not have dominion over you. Friends, listen to these words. These are words of power. Choking, bondage, servitude, reigning, dominion. But how are my brethren viewing these people that are out here lost in the world? Oh no, they're fine. Go on, go on out there. Yeah, you've taken a hard hit, but you can make another, you can play another down. You're good. Go ahead and go on out there. Oh, we'll put a little tape on that, and we'll send you back out on the field to play. Day after day, your friends and loved ones are suffering because they're choking and they're suffering under dominion and bondage of sin. And what are you saying? Well, I'm not going to tell you the truth, because to tell you the truth would cost me too much. Now, friends, there is a cost to the truth. Knowing truth and telling the truth and exposing what is wrong, it's going to cost something on both sides. It's going to cost the person that knows the truth and is telling the truth, and it's going to cost something to the person that is in error, that is hearing the truth. And oftentimes, the cost for some people is more than they're willing to pay. One of the first costs that's going to end up being paid is the loss of tradition. Most of the religious world and the sin in which they're in is because they are steeped in nothing more but tradition. Now, before we get away from this idea of what it is that sin is actually doing, I forgot that I wanted to look at Jonah chapter 2 and notice the situation in which Jonah found himself and how he felt about his situation and the results that came about of his sin. Jonah chapter 2 and verse 1, then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly. So he's already been thrown out of the boat and he's in the fish's belly. And said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord. How is his behavior described? Not only the behavior, but the result of his behavior. It's affliction. Now, friends, that's what sin is. Sin is an affliction. It is a sickness. It is a disease. Now, it's pleasurable for a time. And don't we all know it? I know that sin is pleasurable. But when you reap sin, or when you sow sin and it comes time to reap what you've sown, friends, it's not pleasurable then, it's an affliction. It will eat you, it will destroy you. Notice this, by the reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me out of the belly of, notice this, out of the belly of hell cried I, and thou heardest my voice. Hell or the grave there. Being in the fish's belly was like being in a tomb, like being buried alive. And that's what sin does. Chokes us, bounds us up. For thou hast cast me into the deep, in the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. He is in the deep of the sea without any way of escaping. He's just drowning, sinking, and there's nothing that he can do about it. Oh, that sounds like a fun place to be. Now, our friends, again, they may be living a lifestyle of sin and they may be portraying themselves, oh man, I'm living it up and I'm having a good time. But guess what? When they're alone, I'm just look, for example, Jonah, he's alone here. Nobody else is around and it's just him and he's looking at his situation. They're miserable. They are in a grave, in a tomb, encompassed about, surrounded by the sea, nowhere to go, nowhere to escape. Billows and the waves are passing over. If you've never been out to the ocean and been out swimming out in the ocean and been caught in a, in a wave, in an undercurrent, where you have one wave suck you down and you're struggling to get back up, and just as you get back up to get a breath, another wave comes crashing down on you. That's what Jonah's describing here. That's his situation. That's what sin puts a person in. You're like a person trying to come up for air, and you're just not able to do it. Then I said, I am cast out of thy sight, yet will I look again toward thy holy temple. The waters compassed me about, even to the soul. The depth closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped about my head. He's at the very bottom in all of this. I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption, O Lord my God. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto thee into thine holy temple, that they that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. Now, friends, that's exactly what we have going on in the religious realm. You got a bunch of vanity going on. Worthlessness. You call it worship, but God calls it sin. He calls it vanity. And notice what you do when you involve yourself in vanity. You forsake your own mercy. Now, does this sound like a good time? Oh, yeah, that sounds like a great time. No, friends, that sounds like a terrible time. And that is where a lot of your friends and your family members are at this very hour. You're telling me that you are a member of the Lord's church and you've got a relative, somebody in your family that is also a member of the Lord's church, but also living in adultery? And you know the truth about God's word and what God has to say about a brother that's living in adultery, and you haven't said a word? Now, guess what, friends, brethren? If you know it, don't you think your relative knows about it? If you know the truth about it, you don't think your relative knows about the truth? And what is that doing to him? If he hasn't seared his conscience to the point where he doesn't feel anything, he's right here with Jonah. He knows he's doing wrong. When he's with this person, when he's with this mate that he's committing adultery with, I'm sure that he feels just fine. But what happens when he gets alone and he's alone with his own thoughts? It starts to choke at him. Friends, sin is a serious business. It is a serious thing. It is a real thing. And just like CTE, it is killing people. And guess what? We know it. The question is, are we willing to lose some things so as to be able to uphold the truth and to help people come out of it? Now, when we're discussing the loss of tradition, just consider for a moment, we started with our introduction to Dr. Omalu and how that he came out with information. Now, friends, just think about what his information was going to do to football. You have connection with the death of 87 football players being connected directly to the basic element of football, and that's helmet to helmet contact. And not even just helmet to helmet, just simple tackling in general. Did you hear from the clip? The safety coming in after a running back and the speed at which they're running, it is the same amount of force as if you had just taken a sledgehammer and hit them over the helmet with a sledgehammer. Now just think about what that was going to do to the tradition of football. Friends, that information would ruin football. Now, how do you think a lot of people felt about Dr. Omalu and his findings? Were they happy to hear it? Oh, thank you, doctor. We're so glad that you came out with this information that's going to end up saving the lives of so many of these players. Going to end up making these gentlemen's lives so much better as they get into their old age. Friends, these people were more concerned about the tradition of football than they actually were with the concern of human life. Now, I'm not talking about the NFL. We realize the NFL had that problem, but I'm talking about your everyday, your average Joe. People that don't have any stock in football other than the fact it's just their tradition. I like football. I love football. I enjoy watching football. You're telling me you're going to take football away from me? Well, is your tradition of sitting down in a chair every Sunday to watch grown men chase a piece of pigskin around the field worth a man's life, and for him to die in such a cruel way? For a lot of them, they're saying, yeah, I want my tradition over these men's lives. Now, what do you think is going on in the religious world? In the religious world, you've got people placing tradition over the very value and worth of their eternal soul. We've got the truth on what the Bible says about how we're supposed to worship, what it is we're supposed to teach, what it is that we're supposed to believe, and how that can actually end up setting men free that are in bondage in religion. Remember, in John chapter 8, verses 32 through 34 there, Jesus is talking to religious people. He is talking to Jews, and he's telling them, you're religious and you believe, but you still haven't been set free yet. Now, why was that? Well, notice what the problem was that the Jews had. We're going to jump ahead here very quickly. Matthew chapter 15, verses 2 and 3. The Jews had the same problem that many people today have. Why? They came to him asking him. Pharisees came asking Jesus, why do thy disciples transgress the traditions of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. But he, Jesus, answered and said unto them, why do ye also transgress the commandments of God by your tradition? Why were the Jews still in bondage? Why were they needing to be set free? Because they had allowed their own traditions to have them transgress the actual commandments of God. Stuff that they had made up. That's what a tradition is. It's man-made. And they started elevating that above the actual commandments of God. Now, how do you think people feel when you come along and you present the truth? We mentioned that both parties have something to lose. We're on television, we're under tents, we're out doing door knocking, we're in the assemblies at different times, and what are we presenting? We're presenting the truth of the commandments of God and how you need to follow the commandments of God, and you need to leave behind man-made traditions. Do people thank us for that? Do they just appreciate us and do they love on us? No, they hate us. They despise us. Why? Because they're so caught up in their tradition that they would actually sacrifice their own soul just so they can stay involved in their tradition. Traditions like worshiping with mechanical instruments and music, just got to have that piano. Well, I know it's not in the New Testament, and I know that the New Testament Christians, they didn't worship with mechanical instruments and music. But you know what? I just love my tradition so much. You see, that's a sickness. That's a disease. And we've got the cure. We've got the truth on it. But are we willing to pay that cost? To try to tear away from somebody their tradition? Are we willing to do that? Are we ourselves, as members of the Lord's church, are we willing to give up certain traditions that are in fact, that could very possibly be going against the commandments of God? Now, could it be the very case that the tradition of football, and I was hoping I could get to my desktop here. I haven't quite figured out how to do that just yet on Windows 10. Nope, don't need that. Only way I can think of doing it without losing my place is to get out of this, and caller, just hold on just for a second. Have a clip here that I'm wanting to play, and it's in the PowerPoint, but it's a little ways into the PowerPoint. Could very well be the case that even within our very own brotherhood, that the tradition of football could end up sending us to hell. Let's give this a listen.
The NFL wants you to say you made it all up. They're accusing you of fraud. If you retract, you'll be fine. This all goes away. Why are they doing this? They're terrified. We have an army of this go out to war with a corporation that has 20 million people on a weekly basis craving the same way they crave food. The NFL owns the day of the week. The same day the church used to own. Now it's theirs. They're very big.
The NFL in our society, to a lot of people, they actually own what's supposed to be the Lord's Day. And our brethren are, in fact, feeding that machine. Now, brethren, that's scary to me. That we can actually get entangled in what the world is doing and what the world is promoting without even realizing that we're being sucked into it, in such a deep way. Good evening, caller. You're on What's the Bible Say? Hello, caller. All right, going once, going twice. Hello, hello. All right, maybe they'll call back here in just a minute. But friends, on this is what we're dealing with. Now, just think about what was said in that clip. You've got 20 million people that are craving after their product. Craving after their product like they crave after food. And how many of these so-called Christians, these religious people, and they're craving what these false teachers actually have. And they do not even realize that the false teachers are abusing them and mistreating them, and they are actually choking the very life from them. Good evening, caller. You're on What's the Bible Say?
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you tonight?
Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, I heard you talking about football. The way I got it, one team losing, another team is winning. The way I got it, it's gambling anyway. And it don't have to be no money in it. There's money in that, but it really don't have to be no money in it. It's still gambling. It's a sin. And I want your comment on this, and you're doing a good job. Thank you.
All right, we appreciate that. Well, as far as seeing, football within itself being gambling, I mean, not all football is gambling. I mean, myself, my little brother, and some of the kids from the neighborhood, we get together and we play football. You think we're gambling because, we're little kids and we're out here playing football? Now, I understand what he's saying in the sense that, people actually going out there and putting money on the games and how that's wrong. But I mean, if you're looking at the entire system of football and what it stands for, it certainly is wrong in that respect. But as far as just playing football, being gambling and being a sin, no, sir, I can't see how you can reach that conclusion logically. Good evening, caller. You're on What's the Bible Say?
Yeah, Micah.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard about it, but they did it to the state of Arizona, the NFL, and they're doing it to Georgia now because Arizona was going to pass a law against homosexuals, and they threatened to take the Super Bowl from Arizona, and they're doing the same thing to the state of Georgia now about homosexuality, and the NFL's threatening them if they do anything against homosexuality, that they will take their Super Bowls out of their state.
And that,
I don't know if you'd heard that or not, but that's what I've been reading and hearing about it.
no, I had not heard that. Most of the stuff I keep track with is what's, stuff that's pulling out of here in North Carolina. But I mean, but that just, that's another example of what we're stating here. I mean, here we have people that are glorifying in this system, and it's really as being nothing more than a detriment to our society.
Yeah, well, I've always liked football. I've been a Redskin fan, but I've done come to the point where I think I don't need to watch it anymore because of nothing else, because of that homosexual thing.
Well, and then you got, they're advertising beer. I mean, every other commercial is a beer commercial, and I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot of better things we could be doing with our time instead of just, especially on the Lord's Day. I mean, just think, if we were to diminish football, how many, hopefully how many more people would end up, start going back to church.
Well, you're right there. I make it every day. I went today.
All right. Well,
I'm in the Church of Christ.
Right.
I can't miss that communion. We got to remember the Lord's sacrifice on the first day of the week.
Right. All right. Well, I appreciate that information. I had not heard that.
Okay, you take care.
All right. You too. Have a good night. All right. And, I appreciate the calls, and especially the last one, and, connecting what the NFL is trying to do with the homosexual agenda. I really do appreciate that. But friends, and I meant to say this at the beginning, with the illustration, I'm not wanting to get all caught up in football. That's just an illustration to show you what happens when truth is being hidden. People's lives are hanging in the balance. We're in the spiritual discussion now. We're looking at what churches are doing, that they're actually covering up the truth. They're concealing the truth. And for what? Our point that we're on right now is just so they can, save their traditions. And friends, brethren, tradition can end up sending a person to hell. You can lose your soul over tradition. I mean, the Jews right here at this very point, they are in danger of damnation. Because what are they doing? They're allowing their traditions to actually trump, to actually end up allowing them to transgress the very commands of God. But what happens? People get so caught up in their traditions, and they don't want to lose their traditions. Well, that's just part of the cost when it comes to knowing the truth. Another cost of the truth, hearing the truth and telling the truth, is a loss of reputation. You lose your tradition, but you see, friends, that's the thing about tradition, just very quickly. Though you may be losing some traditions, you end up picking up others. It's not like you're just completely losing your tradition and you're not replacing it with anything. You might have to put away those man-made traditions, but guess what? You then get to pick up godly traditions. Traditions that will actually be pleasing to God. Now, notice this in loss of reputation. When Dr. Amalu was bringing out this information, we've actually kind of already hit on this. Nobody was loving on him for his information. The NFL actually sought about to destroy him. Why? Because they didn't want that information to get out. They didn't want the truth to get out about what he was presenting. Because why? It was going to hurt them. It was going to hurt their business. It was going to hurt the massive reputation that they had built for themselves throughout this country. Now, what do you think is going on now again, back into the spiritual realm? We don't want to get all hung up on football. We're dealing with, spiritual things tonight. What about in these man-made churches, where these preachers actually know what the truth is? I guarantee you that Brian Edwards, after having that debate with Dad, and even before having the debate, we have clips where he's calling into the show, so we know he was watching the shows. Watching the shows, having the debate with Dad, and then even throughout the years that have gone on, having different conversations with Dad about the Bible. He knows, I know that he knows the truth of what the Bible has to say about the one true church. There is no Baptist church. The truth about salvation. The truth about worshiping correctly. The truth about scriptural organization. But yet he's still over there in a man-made church with man-made traditions. Why is that? Because of reputation. He doesn't want to lose the reputation that he has over there at Blessed Hope. He doesn't want to lose, and it's not just Brian Edwards, but it's all the different preachers that we have interacted with over the past. Different ones have been watching this broadcast, and they know, with beyond the shadow of a doubt, what the Bible teaches and what the truth is. But they're covering it up, they're hiding it, because they have a reputation to keep. Now, what is that doing to the people that are coming to their services, that are sitting underneath them? Is that helping them in any way? No, friends, what's going on there? That's just like CTE. It's choking them. They're still in bondage. Their lives are not changing. Their lives are not being made any better. And they're there in that assembly, and they're suffocating to death. Good evening, caller. You're on What's the Bible Say?
It's Charles out of Oklahoma City. I wanted to say to you, Brother Micah, when you think of the NFL, and people don't think about this when it's, trying to get the word out, but those guys got to have incredible intensity,
Mm-hmm.
They got to go after it like their lives depended on it, But somehow, we got folks in the church and stuff. You get to this, and it's time to back it up, But
Right.
if them fellas showed cowardice on the field, you wouldn't have no reputation.
Right. And yeah,
They study.
And that
to get ready.
And that really is a backwards way of thinking with our brethren. Our brethren think, well, we can sit back and be easy and be able to, gain this reputation, but really it's going out and having that tenacity and that veracity that actually builds a reputation.
If you think of like the coaches like a preacher, that's great, you got a preacher, but the coaches don't get out in the field,
Right.
I mean, they practice, they get out during the week, they show you stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But you got to take what they tell you and go on Sunday and do something with it,
Right. Yeah.
And, and also study. And if you don't pay attention to what's going on in that field, you will get blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
And you will get hit in the head like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The same thing happened here. If you don't watch what people are saying or teaching, you will fall for stuff, and because you don't want to aggravate anything,
Mm-hmm.
But if you watch the football team, even people in church, if you follow a football team, if they came out there and did nothing, you'd stop following. You're like, these guys are cowards.
Right. Yeah, you try to find another team, wouldn't you?
Right. You know, well, you might pick the wrong team, but you might say, well, at least they're wrong, but they are intense.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Well, hey,
All right, keep up the good work.
all right. We appreciate it. Thank you for the call.
Yeah, bye.
All right. Coming from Oklahoma, we appreciate them calling in. And friends, Jesus said that if we're going to present this information, he told us that we're going to lose our reputations. John chapter 7, verse 7, John 15, 18, and also 1 John chapter 3, verse 13. He told his apostles, the world cannot hate you, but me it hateth, because I testify of it, that the works thereof are evil. Chapter 15, verse 18, if the world hate you, ye know that it hated me before it hated you. 1 John 3, 13, marvel not, my brethren, if the world hate you. But yet we've got brethren, like this caller was calling in and saying, we've got brethren that are sitting around and they're not doing anything. Why? Oh, well, we can't have anybody say anything negative about the church. Just like he said, like the caller said about not studying, when a member of the church makes that statement to me, that tells me right there that they're not studying, that they don't know their Bible. And that not only do they not know the Bible, but they don't know Jesus. They don't know our Lord. These are the very words of Jesus. Jesus said the world is going to hate you. Why is the world going to hate us? Because it hated him first. You're telling me that there are people alive that hated Jesus? Yes, they hated Jesus. Why? Because he told them the truth. He told them the truth, and guess what? Those people were not in truth. They were holding to their traditions. And they were trying to hold on to their reputations. Notice this in John 11, verse 48. The Pharisees, the Jews, you know what they're scared about? If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and our nation. They're worried about their reputation. We cannot follow this Jesus, and not only can we not follow him, but we cannot leave him alone and let him teach. Because if we leave him alone and let him teach, that's going to hurt our reputation. So what are we going to try to do? Well, we're going to try to cover up the truth. And guess what that does? Covering up the truth leaves the world in sin. And that's not what the church and that's not what Christians are supposed to be about. We are in the business, just like our Lord was in the business of saving that which was lost. We are in the business of converting and helping people to repent, helping them to change. We are in the business of saving these people. Now, we hit on point number 3 at the beginning. We're discussing the loss of wealth. Creflo Dollar and all these different guys, Jesse Duplantis. What are they doing? What's their concern? Do they care about truth? No, they don't care about truth. All they care about is that money. Religion is a money-making business if you're teaching false doctrine. Now, if you're telling the truth, people aren't going to like you for the truth. Now, friends, this is bigger than us. We've got some folks outside of the Lord's church. We even got brethren inside the Lord's church that just think that we're out here in Virginia, North Carolina, putting on this show because we're trying to make a name for ourselves. Friends, if we're trying to make a name for ourselves, we're not doing a very good job, are we? You say Robertson in this area, and people, man, I'm sure a little vomit comes up and they got it there in their mouth. They cannot stand to hear the name Robertson. Our name has become a hiss and a byword. You know what? That's fine. That's fine if you don't like hearing, well, the Robertsons are coming. They're coming to visit your church. That just tells us that, you know what, we're doing something right. We're getting some type of information out there across your table into your ears that, okay, you don't like it, but why don't you like it? Friends, people do not like truth when they're on the wrong side of truth. People do not like truth when it ends up costing them something. And what people do not realize is if they're not careful, it'll end up costing you more than just your traditions, your reputation, and your wealth. You stay out there in a system and you try to stay blind to the truth and you try to cover up the truth, you're going to lose your life. Physically and spiritually. You're out there in a man-made church, and even with some of our brethren, you're out there in a man-made church and even in the Lord's church, and you've got preachers and they're not preaching on sin. They're not preaching on the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse, gambling, on self-control, temperance, not losing your temper. They're not preaching on covetousness, materialism, not telling the young people about the dangers of pornography and fornication and adultery, gossiping, and just in general, breaking the laws of God. You're going to lose your life for that. These things destroy lives. Now, just again, let's put this in connection back with our illustration. This individual that drove his truck in the wrong direction and died in a fiery crash was 36. He left behind a wife and 2 little children. Why? Because the NFL covered up the truth about what was happening to his brain when he went out there and played a game. What is happening to the families in our communities? Because preachers are covering up the truth. We've got broken homes all over the place. We've got husbands abandoning their families because they want to go and be with somebody else. And vice versa with the wives. And what are the preachers doing? Are the preachers doing anything about it? Oh no, we love you. We're not in the condemning business. We're not in the judging business. Just come on in. Okay, you're loving this person that's gone out and committed adultery, but what about the person that he left? What about his mate? What about them? The hurt that they're going through. You see, friends, that's what we're needing to realize when it comes to sin. And that is the cost of the truth. You might end up losing your traditions, but guess what? You'll gain more. You might end up losing, in a great sense, a reputation, but guess what? If it's in error, it's not a reputation that you want anyways. And friends, Jesus never taught prosperity in the way that we have preachers teaching it today. This health and wealth gospel, he never taught that. He said that we are going to be hated, and it may even come to the point where we're end up going to be killed for the truth's sake. Are we willing to pay that cost? Friends, we're glad that you have tuned in. Appreciate you for watching. Hope this information was beneficial for you. If you can reach out to us and we can assist you in some way, we want you to do that. Appreciate all the calls that have come in. Continue to watch, continue to pray for us, and we'll continue to pray for you. Always ask for what does the Bible say, and you will get a word from the Lord. Have a good night.